Okie dokie. Into the light we go with Stan Katz. That's not the name of this video. This video is called Swift Conversations. So
that's cool.
Let's have some Swift conversations in the brand new Suzuki Swift. You in?
I'm in. Right. Anything Swift, I'm in.
Favorite memory of John Burks?
I have so many good memories of John.
Share some.
I mean, the best thing about John was his phone calls.
People still remember John Burks for his prank calls.
Yes. He was, the difference between me and John was I used to prepare my shows. I was possibly over-prepped. John would breeze into the studio and make it up as he went along.
That was me.
That was you as well?
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, but
John Robbie used to prep like crazy.
Yeah, John learned that from me, actually. Yeah. John would, for his 6 a.m. Time slot, he would get to the station
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock in the morning.
You could set your watch
and read the newspapers and everything.
Yeah.
And geez, he did that for years. I used to do, when I did the morning zoo, my time slot was also 6 to 9. It gave me one more good reason for dying in my sleep.
What time did you arrive at the studio? 1 minute past 6?
1 minute past 6, 5 minutes past 6.
While the news is running.
I would be driving my car and listening to my opening theme.
Like a proper radio DJ.
And one time I was running late, so I had a Porsche. I was driving really fast. Now, I don't know if you remember, were you at Atkinson House?
I dropped my demo off at Atkinson House in 1989.
They had this basement parking with a curve, the wall curving round. I would scrape my car along the wall.
The wall guided you into
the wall guided me in, and then I would have to go on air and sound like I was on top of the world.
Damn right.
Sound like I was having the time of my life. Meantime, I wanted to be holding my head and sobbing for what I'd just done to my car.
You're talking about John Burks. I think one of the things that people don't realize about John is what a soft and warm human being he was.
Very. One of the most. He was known for his stinginess. I mean, if John took a rand out of his pocket, the buffalo would blink at the sun. But he helped so many people. He
helped me.
He helped you, and I tell you, he helped you on more than one occasion.
Yes.
When I was setting up Radio Today, I was talking to Berksy. I said, I need someone for the breakfast show. John, who do you suggest? He said, Tom London.
Oh, that's lovely to hear.
So that's when I called you.
Wow.
It was on Burks's suggestion.
And we won the best breakfast show at the Liberty Radio Awards.
The first, I mean, you'd only been on air for less than a year, and you won best breakfast show.
2 months.
So yeah, you didn't know that.
I didn't know John recommended you.
John recommended you. He said, there's only one guy.
Wow, that makes me very, proud.
He said, get Tom London.
Sure.
And that's when I phoned you.
Sure.
And you thought it was because of me. I enjoyed your show when you did 9 o'clock on 702.
Everyone says they enjoyed Talk at 9.
Yes.
And the show that I'm most proud of is Weekend Breakfast.
Really?
Yeah.
I never listened to you on Weekend Breakfast, but I listened often on the 9 o'clock show.
Weekend Breakfast
Talk at 9.
Yeah, Weekend Breakfast had the biggest numbers.
Yes.
And it was my baby.
Yes.
And they said, we want you across 5 days a week. You're going to Talk at 9. And I resisted for 18 months.
So were you just doing weekends or just Saturdays?
Saturday, Sunday.
Okay, the whole weekend.
Yeah, 7 to 10, Saturday, Sunday. The show was big. It was second biggest on 702, biggest on Cape Talk.
Wow.
And then they said, off you go to Talk at 9. And I knew my audience would halve.
Wow.
And I resisted it for 18 months. And then they sent me
Why did you think your audience would halve?
Because it's nighttime.
Okay. Oh, they wanted you to do every night.
Yeah, they wanted me across the week, Monday to Friday.
All right.
And I said, I don't want that show. And they forced me into it.
How did they force you?
Well, Ian Grace flew over from Australia and told me if I didn't take the show, he'd fire me himself. So I took the show in the boardroom at Prime
That's
Media.
a very compelling reason.
It's an easy way to make a radio DJ
Very compelling
switch.
reason.
Yeah. So I did the show, but I had already signed a contract with Vodacom. I had a day job, and I wanted to resign, and they said, please don't resign. And I said, but I want to leave. I can't maintain 2 jobs. And so I started causing havoc, hoping they'd fire me.
You'd already taken the job.
Yes.
With Vodacom.
I was working at Vodacom.
You were doing Vodacom during the day.
And Talk at 9 at night.
And Talk at 9 at night.
Yes.
Wow, that's too much.
Very heavy. And
that's too much.
And they said, but we don't want you to leave. And I stayed. But at the same time, I was hoping they'd fire me. So every day I'd think of something I could say that would get me fired. That was my show prep. I'd go, well, if I talk smack about the CEO, surely they'll fire me. And I'd go on air and I'd talk smack about the CEO and they wouldn't fire me. And the more rubbish I spoke...
Who was the CEO?
Terry Falkvane.
Okay.
And the more I spoke about Paladi Gwangwa and Terry Falkvane, the more I said I didn't like the management, the more I said I'm trying to get fired, the more I did it, the more popular the show became. and now when I meet people that say, yeah, your Talk at 9 was the best, and all I was trying to do on that show was get fired so I could leave.
That's a very good story. And the more you talked about them, the better the show did.
It became better.
Wow.
So, yeah, I learned something.
I enjoyed your show. You were a natural and a very warm communicator.
Do you think there is a natural? Do you think you say, okay, so a broadcaster like Burks or Tom, John Robbie said the same thing to me. I wouldn't be able to do what you can do, and I need to prepare. But I think
Did you do no preparation?
No,
nothing.
I think I did my 10,000 hours behind a microphone. You know, I think I spent, and my preparation would be, I'd spend the whole day sitting in coffee shops, reading newspapers, looking at people, thinking of what I could talk about that night. So my prep was in my head.
Now, I prepped a lot because when I worked in the States with Wolfman Jack, he had 2 script writers with him in the studio at all times. So he would pay them $5 a line, and he would cross off the line as he used it.
And that's another $5.
Another $5. So there were 2 guys. They would each get, and I saw how he prepped. There was Charlie Tuna, also did an enormous amount of prep. In the States, the guys would prep a 3-hour show. They'd spend a day.
Proper preparation, yeah.
And that's where I learned it.
Yeah.
But
I think music radio, ironically, I think music radio requires a lot of prep.
Enormous amount of prep. Because you've got just the intro.
It's all about the timing.
It's the timing. You've got the introduction to the vocals on the song to get in and get out. It takes enormous. You can't busk it. You can't busk it.
No, I find that talk you can. You can always go open lines and just follow what the people are talking about.
Did you do music? Because I remember you only as talk.
No, I did music on 94.7 in 1997.
Okay, I'd left at that stage.
Then I moved to Radio Bop, and I did the afternoon drive on Radio Bop, which was a music show.
Yes.
And in 2007, I did a show with Anele when she came to work at 94.7. We did the 7 to 10 show at 94.7.
And thereby hangs a tale.
Yeah, well, Anela's she's done so well. She's an interesting character.
Yes.
She's a proper radio person. She's interesting enough to be on radio, in my opinion.
Yes.
So, but go back to Burks. I remember I was getting quite a lot of negative criticism.
For what?
I used to say I was from Springs, and then people would write into the Star newspaper and say, how could you put a Springs guy on the radio?
What does that mean? I was from Africa. What chance did I have?
Obviously someone who didn't live in Springs wrote into the Star newspaper.
How can you put a guy from Springs on the radio?
Yeah, it was a big across. I was just having coffee. It came through my nose when I saw that headline. It was talking about me. And I went to John. I asked John if I could come to his house, and I went to his house and I asked him for
some tips.
Advice. I asked him twice in my career. Once I asked him how to handle negative advice, and he said, you're going to have to roll with it, kid, and let it become part of your brand. He just, great advice. And then when I became popular, people would say, we love your show, and they'd compliment me, and I didn't know how to respond to the compliments. And I went to Burks and I said, what do I do? And
I'll tell you a story about Burks.
He said, have you ever considered saying thank you? I went, what? And from then on it became easy. If someone said, we love your show, or I love your show, I said thank you. And it was so easy.
Probably the reason you weren't saying thank you was, like me, you didn't think you were that good.
Well,
I didn't think I was that good. I didn't feel my compliments were warranted.
Perhaps it's a South African thing where people compliment us and we go, oh no, I'm just trying. I'm very sad. But what were you going to tell me about Burks?
Okay, Burks. Every now and then if his numbers were dipping,
Yeah.
we would stage something.
Yeah,
He
for
would
sure.
do something or say something. Now, at the time, I was the MD of 702. I was the managing director. I would then, it was all staged, I would go on there and fire him.
And the numbers would go
The
up.
numbers would go up, and I would get death threats.
For sure.
How could you fire And Burks was a polarizing figure. You either loved him or you hated him.
Yes.
So one time I go on air and I fire him for something he said. It was all staged. And we had a guy who was pressing the buttons. Shaul, do you remember Shaul?
Fanike?
I think so. He was the guy. Well, I mean, he wasn't a personality.
Yeah.
He ran
The desk.
the mixing desk. So Burks comes off air, and I say, Shaul, you're on. Shaul goes on. He calls himself Cowboy Strange.
Oh, wow.
He was terrible. So I have to fire him. So I
The
go on
numbers went
there.
up again.
People said, no, he's great, don't fire
Oh,
him.
wow. Oh, wow.
Which made me think how much, I suppose there's an audience for
Everything.
everything.
Tell me, I saw a piece you did with Gareth Cliff a little while ago where Aki Anastasiou was speaking about you.
Yes,
I mean, anyone who worked at 702 worked with Aki.
yes.
I think he was there longer than anyone else.
Well, I hired Aki straight out of school.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. You were a rock star in those days. You lived like a rock star.
I lived like a rock star.
And yet you told him to finish school. You
Yeah.
were responsible enough to make sure he finished his education. Where did that come from? Where did that fatherly advice? I think you phoned his father and said that he had to finish school.
I think Rena told me because I was going to hire
Oh,
him.
it came from Rena.
I think Rena said, on condition that he finishes matric, which he did. Now, you talk about a natural. Aki was a natural
Character.
character.
Yeah.
He played himself.
Yes.
I don't think he did any prep.
No.
And then I fired Aki.
Genuinely fine.
Genuinely fired Aki on more than one occasion, because I would be doing a gag and Aki would be running the desk. Explain that to the viewers.
Running the desk is pressing the volume buttons and putting the ads in at the right time and
Yes.
firing the songs and the news.
So I would be doing a gag and I'd be going for the punchline, and Aki would fire up an ad because he
just
didn't
before the punchline.
just before the punch and totally destroy the joke. And I would be yelling, Rena, get rid of Aki, fire them. I won't use the word.
Yeah.
Fire him. And luckily she didn't take my instructions. But and next thing, Aki's this big expert on tech.
Yeah. Yeah, he's built quite a career for himself.
Built himself a career on tech.
Let's talk Mansfield. When
Yeah.
when Prime Media bought 94.7,
Yes,
Jeremy was working at 702.
correct.
He was a talk show jock.
He was doing a double hander
With Jenny.
with Jenny Chris Williams.
What made you pull him over to
Okay.
Highfield?
He came to me and he said, listen, he'd like to do music. If ever the opportunity arises for him to do a music slot, he'd welcome it. So I stuck him on breakfast on Highfield Stereo, as it was
94.7.
94.7.
A Rude Awakening. Who came up with the name?
I did.
Was it yours?
Yeah.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. Because he was rough.
Yeah.
I mean, he sailed very close to the wind. I thought the best way to deal with an objection is to anticipate it. So I called it the Rude Awakening. So if anybody complained, I would say, well, listen, we told you this. We
Name's
told
on
you
the
what
tin.
we told you what to expect, and you're getting what we told you you'd get.
I don't think people know how much money that show raked in on a yearly basis.
Well, I know how much money he had. 85% of the revenue on Highfield Stereo, 94.7, came from that morning
Kind
show.
of one show.
Well, look, the morning show always pulls the biggest,
But not
biggest numbers.
85% in under normal circumstances.
85%. And he was rough.
I think when I left Prime Media, that show was turning over 300 million a year.
Yeah, that would make sense. We paid him well. Yeah. And we let him go. Malcolm Freed, I put Malcolm Freed in charge of 94.7. His job was to manage Jeremy. He would come in, he would be on with the show from 6 in the morning till Jeremy finished.
Sure.
And his job was to just temper Jeremy's natural inclination to be rude. But huge talent, Jeremy. I loved his impersonations. Sipiwe, who was the guy?
The gay
railway
conductor.
The railway.
Hello, Jeremy.
That's very good, Tom. That's very good, Tom. Yeah, massive talent. We interviewed Jeremy for the 4 Ps.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's think of who else we can chat about.
We've chatted about John Robbie.
Let's properly chat about John Robbie.
All right.
John Robbie didn't come from radio, but he became one of the greatest radio broadcasters in this country's history.
And I'll tell you how that happened.
How?
Birksey.
Again?
Yeah, because
Wow.
John Robbie was a fly half for the British Lions. He came out here to play rugby.
For the Lions in Joburg.
For the Lions in Joburg, yeah. He came out to play rugby for the British Lions, and he stayed.
Yes.
He stayed. And Burke said, here's a guy who knows sport. So we stuck him in. He was the coach. He did the sports report on the morning show. And now here's a great story. So David Blood was doing 9 to midnight on 702. He went on holiday.
For 2 weeks, I believe.
I don't remember how long, but it cost him his job.
Long enough to come back and John Robbie had taken the show.
So John Robbie came to me and he said, listen, can he stand in for David Blood while he's away? I said, that's not a bad idea. I didn't think he would do any harm. Didn't think he was that good. Certainly he was good as a sports coach. But when David Blood came back from leave, John Robbie had his show.
What?
The moral of the story is,
don't take holidays.
if you're on radio, don't take holidays.
Never.
Yeah.
What do you think made John so magnetic?
Because he was fearless. He was fearless. He took on the South African apartheid regime, and he became world famous. Robbie did. World famous. We were interviewed by all the major networks overseas, CNN, BBC, Fox, you name it. They all came to South Africa to interview, because he was this was the deep, dark days of apartheid. And
when no one was speaking out.
Nobody was speaking out, and John Robbie was. He was fearless. I think as time went on, he tempered his fearlessness. He was not as outspoken as when he started, but when he started, he was totally outspoken. He called it as he saw it.
I remember being a young boy growing up in Springs, way outside of 702's target demographic. But I was in love with the station.
Why were you outside our target demographic?
Well, I was 13 years old.
Oh, I see. And our target demographic was 16 to 49 when it was a music station. 16 to 34 when it was a music station. But it became 25 to 49 when it became talk. So when were you listening, talk or music?
No, I was listening to talk.
Oh, so you weren't listening when it was a music station?
No.
Okay.
I started listening when it was talk, and I was listening to, I fell in love with Birksey.
Yes.
Doing a 9 to midday show, I think was the show he was doing at the time. And I just thought, this guy's the greatest.
No, he wasn't doing.
No?
Was it 9 to midnight?
No, midday.
Oh, midday, yes, correct.
Mid-morning show.
Correct.
I fell in love with the guy and his ability.
Yes.
I mean, the thing that people don't, you had to have watched and studied him to understand some of the greatness, like mic technique. Burks had some of the best mic technique I've ever seen. on a broadcaster.
And his headphones were the loudest.
Mine too.
You could hear him
And I
down.
share that in
you
common.
could hear him down the passage.
I come out of a studio and I can't hear anything because I've turned the volume up.
Well, I think to this day I'm still slightly deaf from listening to my headphones at full volume.
Jenny Chris Williams, another talk show host that really made a splash.
Yes, she was also quite rude, quite outspoken.
Yes.
Her and Jeremy were shock jocks.
Yes.
That show was two shock jocks without a monitor.
I remember listening to that show. It was deadly, that show. And that show only ended, I think, because Jeremy moved to Highveld.
Well, and thereby lies another tale, because when Jeremy said, first of all, he told everyone that he would never move, that he was completely loyal to 702.
Yeah.
And then
He
when
moved.
I stuck him in on mornings on Highveld, he moved. It had a profound impact on 702.
I remember I joined 94.7 in 1997 at 135 Rivonia.
Yes.
And there was a vending machine on the 702 floor, because
Correct.
they were on separate floors.
Yes.
And when I went to go get a Coke one night, the 702 guys chased me out of the floor because I wasn't a 702 staff member. I belonged to Highveld, and they didn't want me anywhere near them. And I remember having a conversation with Jeremy.
Those two stations, which were under the same Prime Media Broadcasting umbrella,
like this,
were at loggerheads with each other.
I remember Jeremy telling me in a conversation once that one of the hardest moments he had when he became famous through that show was getting into the lift at Prime Media, and the 702 people wouldn't speak to him.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say hello to him.
Well, he said he would not leave 702, and then he did. And not only that, but he took away a huge audience,
I think that's
from 702.
Yes. But I think
even though 702 was talk and Highveld was music.
go for the personality.
They went for the personality.
I think you've got to give credit to Terry Falkvein and bringing those stations together and creating a single family. It happened while I was there.
Yes.
I remember the conversation. It was very motherly. She said, "You're all going to be on the same floor and get along with each other." And that was it. We had no choice.
Yeah.
And we've studios next to each other, and all of a sudden people started speaking to each other.
Yeah.
Jeez, Dan. I mean, radio. Still around.
Still around. Always will be.
Despite the onslaught of online, radio's still around.
Well, ever since the advent of television, people have been proclaiming the end of radio.
Yeah.
Well, it ain't happened yet. Ain't happened yet.
Who are your heroes?
Burks.
Really?
Yeah, but my heroes are mostly overseas, mostly American. And having worked with some of them, I worked with some of the best personalities in America: Charlie Tuna, Hudson and Harrigan, Wolfman Jack. But locally, it was Burks. When I was at school, I used to listen to him. When I was at university, I used to listen to Hayes Corner at night with Burks.
Wow.
Also, my hero, and then I landed up working with him. Burks gave me my first break on radio.
Unreal, huh?
He has helped so many people. I think Gareth Cliff
All of us.
was a recipient of Burks's largesse.
Yeah. You must have met a lot of famous people.
Yeah, I did.
And high-profile people.
Yeah.
I've probably interviewed 4,000 people.
4,000.
But I only
as much as that.
I only recall about 10 interviews that really stood out.
How could you have interviewed 4,000
Community
people?
radio.
Oh, before 702.
Community radio, many interviews in a single show. 6, 7, 8 interviews in one show.
Wow. That was a great breeding ground.
It was.
Community radio.
Yes, and it still is. I think it still is.
Yeah, it's a feeder. It's a feeder situation.
Yeah.
It feeds their commercial stations.
So I mean, the byproduct of these careers is that you meet high-profile people and you meet superstars and you meet politicians. Who stands out after all these years?
I'll tell you who, and most people won't even remember him or know who he is. Rick Wakeman.
Who's Rick Wakeman?
He was with Yes.
Oh wow!
Keyboard player for Yes. He said we just clicked, and He said it was the best interview that he'd ever done. Another one was John Helliwell, the sax player and keyboardist for Supertramp. The most disappointing, which stands out to this day, was Brian Ferry.
Oh, really?
He was just so boring.
Boring.
But maybe the chemistry wasn't there. Maybe we didn't click, because it's like that in an interview.
Yes.
You click with somebody, you have a great interview. It becomes a conversation. It's not an interview.
I always worried about when I had to do an interview with a musician, because you didn't know how it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
But I often felt that they would fly into the country, and then the record label would pick them up at the airport, drive them straight to your studio.
Yes.
I mean, nobody wants to do an interview after a long international flight.
Exactly.
You get these sometimes drunk, washed out, fast asleep people in your studio, and the whole thing just goes south.
Yeah. I'm trying to think who else, but those two stand out. Sarah Vaughan.
Oh.
The great jazz singer, one of the greatest jazz singers of all time. So I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you two stories, one with her and one with Arthur Ashe. She wouldn't play in South Africa. This is also in the dark days of apartheid. I was on Swazi radio at the time. They flew me to Swaziland because she was performing at the Holiday Inn in Swaziland, and they flew me out to interview her. And I knew she liked to smoke a bit of weed, so I rolled a joint. We sat down, we did an amazing interview.
You smoked a joint with Sarah Vaughan?
Yep.
That sounds like a country song.
I smoked a joint with Sarah Vaughan. And we again had the most amazing interview.
Fantastic. Eh?
But what I didn't know, I was still a bit of an amateur in those days, I had the microphone near the air conditioner. So when I got back to Johannesburg to play this thing and edit it, all you could hear was the air conditioner.
So the best and worst interview you ever did?
And the other one was Arthur Ashe, the tennis player.
Yes.
Now, nobody wanted to come to South Africa because of apartheid. Yeah. For some reason, he agreed to come. He played Ellis Park. It was the old Ellis Park where they had the tennis courts and everything. I interviewed him, and great interview. I looked down at the tape recorder. I hadn't pressed record. Hadn't pressed record.
Oh no.
This is a great interview.
Oh no.
So you know what I did? And this was a mark of my professionalism.
Yeah.
I'm taking that piss.
Yeah.
It was I said, can we just go over a couple of things again? And I re-interviewed him.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I thought, gee, but you know that feeling, that flop, flop sweat, where that trickle of sweat goes down the back of your neck?
I made a corporate video for South African breweries once. They flew all the C-suite down to PE, to a brewery, and I shot interviews with them.
Yes.
And the cameraman I used didn't bring his headphones, and I was worried about the audio. Anyway, flew back to Joburg, popped that cassette in the machine, and the electric fence had been interfering with the wireless mic. So through every interview was... And it wasn't like today where you put it in the computer and say, take out the clicks.
Yes.
I think I had to pay a guy 10,000 Rand to sit for a week and pull out the individual...
To remove the clicks?
Yeah, it was too valuable. I mean, I could not do that job, and we couldn't fly the CEO of South African breweries down to PE again.
Wow.
So yeah, these things happen.
You know, and I'm sure you've had the same with, you've had mentors in your career, people who advised you, gave you breaks, told you what not to do. We just drove past Prime Media, by the way.
That's right.
Have you been in there?
I haven't been to the new building.
It's stunning.
Is it?
Oh man, stunning. A monument to Proctor, what's his name? Jonathan Proctor's immortality.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Wow.
So, yeah, Berksy gave me my first break on air. I was the music manager, and there's a story there, but I don't know how much time we've got.
I want to ask, here's some of the questions I've got. How do you make a radio station work?
Okay, two things: mornings and music. Get your mornings right, your morning show right. Get your music right. You'll have a good station. Those two things.
How do you sell radio advertising?
Well,
You're an expert on sales.
yeah. I tell you how I became an expert on sales when it occurred to me, first of all, people, if anybody who's viewing this, take away the music, take away the jingles, take away the personalities, take away the competitions.
Mm-hmm.
A radio station is in the business of delivering prospects to advertisers.
Correct.
In other words, our job is to attract potential not advertisers, listeners, and sell them to advertisers.
You're selling their ears.
You're selling their ears. When we didn't have the biggest audience on 702, when we became talk before it caught on, I said, don't count the people you reach the people who count. And that's what we did. We sold the quality of the audience. So the key is morning and music, if you're a music station. And know that you're in the business of delivering prospects to advertisers.
I've got friends.
That was our product, with the ears that we sold to advertisers.
Got it. I've got friends that advertise on billboards.
Yes.
You probably came up with the best billboards we've had in decades.
I didn't come up with the lines. I came up with a strategy. I said,
what was the strategy?
The strategy-
702's billboards, those iconic black and white billboards.
The lines came up by were formulated by Ogilvy Mather. That was our ad agency. My brief to them was, I want to dominate outdoor billboards. I want to dominate billboards. This was before there were so many billboards. Today, I mean,
you can't.
You can't. So anytime a billboard became available, they would buy it.
Sure.
And I said, I want liners on the billboards that you can read at 60 k's an hour.
Now that's what I'm looking for.
That was the.
Okay.
You look at billboards these days, people are basically taking their website and stuck it on a billboard,
Right.
or taking a print ad
Right.
and stuck it on a billboard. What made our things work was you could read them at 60 k's an hour.
That's clever.
And the lines were, as I say, Ogilvy Mather. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. We won awards across the world.
Why did a radio station buy a limousine and a helicopter? That's probably what attracted me to 702.
Yeah.
Was as a teenager,
Yeah.
to know that there was a business in Joburg
Yeah.
that had a limo and a helicopter.
Yeah,
that was a place you wanted to work, live.
Yeah. I had the limo built. It was Eddie Kaizen, I think it was
Tiger Wheel and
Tiger
Tire.
Wheel and Tire, but he for some reason landed up building the limo to my brief. I said, I want a limo. He took two 7 Series BMWs,
Welded them together.
Sure.
Sure.
And we had a choice. We could either have a glass partition or a fridge. I said, give me a fridge that can hold a bottle of champagne.
Perfect.
And so I used it as my personal mode of transportation. I would go out.
I said you looked like a rock star back then.
I lived like a rock star. I would go out at night in my limo, and I didn't have to worry about driving drunk. I just could get out of it and know that I'd get home in one piece.
I was sad when the 702 helicopter was pulled out of the sky.
Well, it was no longer
And
economic.
we've never had a helicopter in the air since.
It was not economically
Too expensive?
viable. Yeah, it was cost a fortune. It became uneconomical.
Sure.
But we were the first people who were doing live traffic reports. Also, I don't know if you know this, the helicopter was configured as an
EMS helicopter as well.
Huh?
EMS, it could land at accident
It could
scenes.
land at accident scenes. You drop off the traffic reporter, and it would fold out into a stretcher. I can't tell you how many people we scraped up off the highway
Saved.
using that.
Who impresses you today?
On radio?
Yeah.
That's an unfair.
So?
Who? Person or station?
Doesn't matter. Both. Let's go station.
I think probably Hot 102.7. They're doing a very good job as a music station.
And in all departments, they're pretty good. Sales
They're
and
very,
marketing
they're very
and
slick.
promotions.
Very slick.
Yeah.
They are probably the natural successor to 702 Music,
Sure.
I think, or Highfeld. They're probably the closest, to what Highfeld was. Talk station. I'll tell you what station I've been listening to is RSG.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you listen to it. I don't know if
No.
give it a try.
I will.
They do a great job if you speak the language, if you understand the language. Very slick, very, it's excellent. It's just a really good station.
And broadcasters? Do you keep your eye on any broadcasters? Or are you over with them?
I'm over with that. Trying to think who won.
I want to single someone out.
Yes.
The morning, you mentioned Hot.
Yes.
The morning show on Hot.
Yes.
Simon Hill.
Yeah, Simon Hill's very funny guy.
Funny guy.
Yeah, Simon, I would go with that.
Secret Sauce.
Yeah.
And Bunny.
And Bunny.
I mean, Simon Parkinson's just a really good anchor. Holds that whole lot together, but
he doesn't do much.
The puppets are, and the characters are those two. And
Simon Hill
they
is
can make you laugh.
Simon Hill, very talented.
Very, very.
Yeah. But yeah, Simon Hill, very funny. Bunny Majaja. They've got a nice chemistry going. And I suppose we have to mention, sadly, Darren Scott, who's going through a really rough time now. Yeah. So. I mean, he is a very talented broadcaster.
Now let's talk about online.
Yes.
I mean, you and I weren't born into an online world.
But you made the transition.
I jumped.
You jumped. You made the transition.
Jumped in 2008 and I left what we now call legacy media.
Yes.
And jumped into online. But it's taken 15 years to kind of get into a position where it's a business.
But you've become an expert. You're my guru as far as online is concerned.
I think that's thanks to my experience at Vodacom and Eleanor Craig Sr. People that taught me a lot.
Yes.
And learning the back end of it all. So now you do all sorts of interesting stuff. You train people?
Yes, I train people in sales mostly. Sales and marketing.
So if a company or someone's watching and they think they need some help on the sales side, are you free? Are you able to do it?
Oh, absolutely.
And they could get hold of you via Facebook or LinkedIn to send a message?
Absolutely. I got into radio because I wanted to be a radio personality. When I discovered, my big aha moment was when I discovered that we're in the business of delivering prospects to advertisers, and that sparked my imagination.
Something that you could get right that other people weren't getting right.
They weren't getting it right in this country. A lot of that had to do with my time in the States. So I always say this: show business is 10% show, 90% business.
Amen.
And to me, radio was the same. The 10% show is the bit that you hear on air.
So does that mean if somebody made toilet rolls, for example, and they needed a sales or marketing strategy, you could do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The product or service doesn't matter. Despite all the new tech and social media and everything, the fundamentals of marketing haven't changed.
Yeah.
It's become a lot more complicated.
Sure. Wow. What do you think of the Swift?
I think it's a
nice
wonderful. I could see myself driving one of these. Birksey drove a Suzuki.
Really?
He had a Ferrari and a Mercedes.
Yes.
But the car he drove most was the Suzuki.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew Birksey had a 200 W126 Merc and he had a Magnum Ferrari. He was one of the only broadcasters to buy a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Birks and Paul Rotherham, I think, owned a Ferrari 308 or 320 GT, I suppose.
But I think Birks's was quite an old model.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was a faded pink color.
You've been unkind there. It was a Ferrari.
It
Man.
was a Ferrari.
What's the nicest car you ever had?
An XKR, Jag XKR.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And a Porsche. I've had 2 Porsches.
And when you've owned those fancy cars,
I wasn't
not a big car guy, huh?
not a big car guy. No.
But the funny thing is, and I've owned some nice cars as well in my life, and then you jump into something like the Suzuki Swift,
Yes.
and you go, wow, this has got everything that my
got
fancy
everything.
cars used to
Yeah,
have. eh?
absolutely.
It's got more.
Absolutely.
So I'm quite impressed
It's
with
comfortable.
it.
It's the finishes are fantastic.
Yeah,
Do they call them finishes?
I think so.
I know you call that in a house or a flat,
Yeah.
but I'm very impressed.
Now, the guys that I work for, the Van Kerkhoven family,
Yes.
Suzuki Ravanya, Suzuki Kailami,
Right.
their central philosophy is that they're the home of happy customers.
Yes.
And the way to get that right is to treat that person like family, not only pre-purchase but post-purchase.
Yes.
I think it's such a great business strategy
Absolutely.
to make your customers your friends and your family and look after them as if they were family.
You know, one of the sayings that I picked up many years ago and still applied, a guy called, I forget, a German retailer, one of the richest men in Germany, big retailing operation. He said, anybody not busy serving a customer ought to be serving someone who is.
Nice.
And so you've got this running throughout the organization. And when you describe the Van Kerkhoven family, that comes to mind.
Business with heart. You know, in a world where everything's going digital and it's hard to find a person to deal with nowadays, I think that's a great strategy. The human touch is so important.
Tom, how about AI? Are you into that?
I love AI.
Yes.
I love AI.
Do you have a favorite AI?
Probably Grok.
Grok, yeah, that's Elon Musk.
Probably Grok. I mean, Grok can take the place of an ad agency nowadays.
It can, eh? It can. And especially since ad agencies aren't fun anymore.
But I will say this, Dan. As much as I'm an online convert and love online, I do worry that we are so plugged in that we don't know what it's like to be plugged out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that the human body and the ears and the brain actually need a unplugged time.
Yes.
From time to time.
Decompress.
And social media and online is so addictive that a lot of people just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's so important in this online world, especially with children,
Yeah.
that they still need to go out into the garden and make mud cakes. And if your kids aren't making mud cakes, they're losing out on something.
Yeah.
Something tangible. It's not sitting in the ether.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old and grumpy.
No. I mean, people talk about it all the time, but nobody does anything. It's almost impossible to wean them off.
Well, the interesting is if you go look at the guys who brought us these products like Facebook and Apple, and none of them had let their children have
Exactly.
I mean,
Isn't that the truth?
They knew. They knew.
Thank you.
They knew how addictive it is.
Yes.
Anyway, well, what a nice drive with you and conversation.
Yes.
Thank you.
We always have good conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We do.
Tom. Thank you. I love talking to you.
Me too. The feeling's mutual. And it's really nice to know that you're still active and helping businesses and turning people into successful salespeople and companies into successful companies. I think if you want Stan Katz to come and inject some of what he injected into Prime Media all those for many, many years, 702 and 94.7 Sun City.
Sun
City ad. That was you.
Did a lot of work on Sun City.
That famous "We Will Rock You" cinema ad.
Yes.
That was you conceptualized it, you voiced it,
And I acted in it.
and you acted in it. So you don't get better than that. And I'm not here to sell Stan Katz, but I will tell you that if you've got a business and you need a little bit of electricity in that sales team or that marketing team, or you need some vuma, there's no better man to call in this country than Stan Katz.
That's very kind of you.
No, I mean it.
Tom.
I'm being
Thank you.
serious. You can get hold of Stan via Facebook and LinkedIn.
Thanks, Tom.
Looking forward to our next chat and
Indeed.
what you're up to next.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, we never We never bumped into anyone, which would make Suzuki happy and Tom happy.
No insurance claims.
No. Yeah. Another swift conversation.